From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla González, and this is From the South. Of the Citizens Action Party. Quesada beat out Alvarado Muñoz in Sunday's vote by a much larger margin than anyone had expected. This election was dominated by the debate over same-sex marriage.
Alvarado Quesada will be Costa Rica's next president. He took almost 61% of the vote, defying polls that showed him locked in a dead heat with Alvarado Muñoz.
Today the world looks to Costa Rica, and Costa Rica once again sends out a beautiful democratic message. Well done, Costa Rica.
Bien hecho, Costa Rica.
Celebrations rang out in the streets of the capital as supporters of the centre-left candidate cheered the results. Many say the election of the former Labour minister brings continuity in office.
I think we can say that at this moment Costa Rica is full of love. Costa Rica was caught up with hate, not just with someone, but with a party. Today, love wins, and we have to show this to the world. Costa Rica is love.
I'm extremely happy for Costa Rica. It was a completely unexpected result, but it confirms the country's fate.
A very different ending to this story for rival Alvarado Muñoz. The 43-year-old former TV journalist conceded quickly, leaving some of his supporters in tears. Muñoz has vowed to restore what he calls traditional values. He wants to prevent gay marriage and to restrict women's access to abortions.
Carlos Alvarado Quesada will take the reins on May 8. The former minister will be sworn in for a 4-year term. At just 38 years old, he will be the youngest president in the modern history of Costa Rica. Shortly after winning the vote, he spoke to the people of Costa Rica and vowed that he will work with them to move the country forward.
Costarricenses.
Fellow Costa Ricans, we celebrate a democratic transition on May the 8th. The shift in power will be austere, just as our government will be. What Costa Rica needs is a government that works hard for the country. I also would like to add that this will not be Carlos Alvarado's government or the PAC government. Today, I call for a national government. Today, I call for the government of the bicentenary. So we move Costa Rica forward as the Republic commemorates its 200 years. We celebrate our path to development.
Serving alongside Carlos Alvarado Quesada will be Vice President-elect Epsi Campbell-Barr. She will be the first black female in this position in Costa Rica. Barr is a founding member of the ruling Citizen Action Party, an economist and an author. In an interview, she says it will be a responsibility to represent the people of African descent, as well as all women and men in the country. The run-up to the election was marked by controversies over the use of religion in the campaigns. There was also concern a vote held on Easter Sunday will result in a low voter turnout. But in the end, people came out en masse to vote in an election process that was deemed to be successful.
6 in the morning. Over 6,500 polling stations opened to get the voters from over 3 million Costa Rican citizens registered at the Supreme Electoral Tribunal.
Everything worked correctly. The electoral observers were here on time, and every poll opened at 6 o'clock. It all went very smoothly.
Religion became a central issue during the electoral campaign. The Electoral Supreme Court got over 900 complaints on religious interferences, both in the electoral campaign and during the electoral process. There were also fears of low participation because of the Holy Week holidays. But the holidays did not keep voters away.
Juntas procesadas
So far, counting the figures of 5,992 station polls, which represent over 90% of all of them, the participation rate reached almost 67%. That is to say, abstention was of 33%. Valid votes for the Citizen Action Party, 1,205,864 votes, 60.66%, and valid votes for the National Restoration Party, 782,009, and valid votes for the National Restoration Party, 782,009, 39.33% of votes.
Del total. Restauración Nacional.
The final outcome will be public on Tuesday, but it is already clear that Carlos Alvarado will be the new president of Costa Rica. A result that proves surveys were wrong.
Yo tengo un compromiso para hacerlo como presidente de la República.
I have a commitment as President of the Republic. Our country needs to work to close the historical gap between men and women, and so we are committed to an equality agenda. A country that should have open chances for people with disabilities, for our elders, who have to build a better future for our children.
Carlos Alvarado called Costa Rican lawmakers to work together to pass new reforms in the Congress needed to move the country forward. That would be the only way to face the great challenges Costa Rica has ahead.
2 more social leaders were killed in Colombia on Sunday, bringing the death toll to 214 since the beginning of 2017. Human rights defender Belisario Benavides Ordóñez was gunned down in Cauca, in the south of the country, while María Magdalena Cruz Rojas, a Colombian land activist, was murdered in Mapiripan, in central Colombia. Ordóñez, who is remembered for organizing commemorations for the International Day of Victims, was shot 4 times in front of his 3-year-old son and his 12-year-old nephew. Cruz Rojas was killed on her farm in front of her husband and son by armed men in hoods. 2 Ecuadorian journalists and their driver who were kidnapped in Esmeraldas province near the Colombian border last Monday are safe, according to the country's interior minister. Cesar Navas told journalists that they were very well and the situation was stable. The news came ahead of a meeting with family members of the victims. Photographer Paul Rivas Bravo, driver Efraín Segarra Abril, and writer Javier Ortega Reyes from El Comercio newspaper were kidnapped by a still undisclosed group while covering the living conditions of the inhabitants affected by the recent bombings and increasing insecurity in the region.
We want to tell the people who have our family members, wherever they are, the 3 families and the whole country are waiting for their quick return, that Ecuador is a country of peace, of good people.
Also in Ecuador, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has repeated that WikiLeaks founder and social activist Julian Assange had promised not to interfere in other states' internal affairs. The statement comes after criticism of the government's decision to restrict the communications of the WikiLeaks founder. The Ecuadorian authorities sent a press release on Saturday saying that the government is acting in accordance with the Constitution and international law and maintains its defense of human rights as well as the national interest. The former Guatemalan dictator Efraín Ríos Montt, who led the country from 1982 to 83, has died at the age of 91. Ríos Montt came to public office through a coup d'etat and presided over one of the bloodiest periods of Guatemala's civil war, as soldiers waged a brutal campaign to root out Marxist guerrillas. Ríos Montt was convicted in 2013 of genocide and crimes against humanity for the massacre, rape, and torture of more than 1,700 indigenous exiled Mayans under a scorched earth policy implemented by security forces under his command. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues report. Welcome back. Mexico's presidential hopefuls have opened the official campaign period with Andrés Manuel López Obrador, popularly known as AMLO, as the frontrunner. The campaign will last 3 months, and more than 88 million people are eligible to vote in the election to be held on July 1st. AMLO is the main candidate of the left, running on a nationalist and anti-corruption platform with the slogan, Peace and Love. U.S. President Donald Trump accused Mexico of doing, quote, very little to stop the flow of people across the U.S. border. In an Easter Sunday tweet, he threatened to target the North American Free Trade Agreement in retaliation. Mexico is doing very little, if not nothing, at stopping people from flowing into Mexico through their southern border, and then into the U.S., he said. They laugh at our dumb immigration laws. They must stop the big drug and people flows, or I will stop their cash cow, NAFTA. Need wall.
Mexico has got to help us at the border. And a lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA. And we're going to have to really see. They had a great chance. The Democrats blew it. They had a great chance, but we'll have to take a look. But Mexico has got to help us at the border. They flow right through Mexico. They send it to the United States. Can't happen that way anymore. Thank you.
Frontrunner López Obrador is expected to be less accommodating than the ruling pre-party to Trump's border wall plans. He responded to Trump's comments in his speech to a crowd thousands strong in Juárez on Sunday, saying that Mexico is no piñata for any other country.
We will not rule out the possibility of convincing Donald Trump on his ill-founded foreign policy, in particular, his derogatory attitude towards Mexicans. We will be very respectful of the United States, but we will also demand respect for Mexicans. Mexico and its people will not be the piñata of any foreign government.
On July 1st, Mexicans will choose a new president, 9 governors, and a new Congress and a Senate. So let's take a look at the main candidates in this upcoming election.
The National Electoral Institute announced that there will be 4 candidates in the upcoming presidential elections in July.
The start of the campaign so far indicates that the electoral process is advancing normally and that the candidates have been registered with all the requirements needed.
3 parties and an independent candidate will have 90 days to convince more than 88.3 million Mexicans. 2 of those candidates participated in public activities on Friday. The Conservative candidate, who also is the youngest, Ricardo Anaya, started his campaign via technology. There, he committed to fighting corruption, and once again he rejected accusations against him for money laundering.
There has been all sorts of lies against me. We tell the government and the authors of this dirty war that this will not affect us, and we will get through this even stronger.
The only independent candidate, Margarita Zavala, managed to get herself into the ballot despite irregularities found by the electoral authorities on the signatures presented for her candidacy. In her first message through social media, she said that she will keep the military security strategy that was initiated by her husband, Felipe Calderón, in 2006.
I say yes to our soldiers and our Marines. I'm going to have the best police in Mexico because I will strengthen the security and justice institutions because you have to have courage to defend your family.
The ruling party candidate, José Antonio Meade, launched his campaign in the Yucatan in the south of Mexico. Meade's campaign had struggled to gain traction despite his reputation as a clean politician. His association within the ruling party and reluctance to criticize its performance has made it hard to position himself as a candidate of change. Most recent surveys show him in 3rd place.
A government in which the only privilege is to be Mexican. There will be no favors for anyone. I will be the first president to be held accountable.
Whoever ends up leading the country for the next 6 years faces several significant challenges, including a lagging economy, a war with powerful drug cartels, and tense relations with the United States under President Donald Trump.
Right-wing demonstrators took to the streets of Sao Paulo on Saturday, demanding that the military intervene in Brazil and implement a military government. Protesters carried banners calling for military intervention to remove politicians who are worsening the levels of violence and crime in the country. On February 16, President Michel Temer authorized a federal military intervention in Rio de Janeiro that will last until December 31st of this year.
I want military intervention because it's the only solution for Brazil now. I'm hoping that the military will come and take care of Brazil and take over the power, because it cannot be the way it is now.
We want order in our country. We want to take these corrupt politicians out of power to put order and progress. Our country is broken. Our country is being dominated by gangs and by criminal factions. We are Brazilian. We need to defend our Brazil. It is God, homeland and family.
In Chile, more than 4,000 families are living in overcrowded camps as the country's housing crisis continues to worsen.
The construction of Chile's so-called vertical ghettos follows a boom in the country's real estate business. Because of poor building standards, housing is increasingly failing to provide decent living conditions.
There has to be a land policy, a land bank set aside for the construction of social housing. The government also has to continue bringing in community housing policies, encouraging residential self-management. We want to see an end to real estate speculation, which puts property in the hands of a small number of people who make huge profits at the expense of ordinary people.
Residents and campaigners have been driven to protest in response to the lack of affordable housing and the absence of regulation.
We need more space, better standard of construction, and neighborhoods with decent infrastructure. We want people to get out of cramped surroundings and into decent homes and integrated neighborhoods.
On the outskirts, where poverty is rife, resident organizations are demanding answers in the absence of state regulation.
We need social programs which improve housing and work for the benefit of the majority. This is what we're calling for today.
Campaigners are calling for a law that guarantees the right to dignified housing, self-management projects, and participation in the development of housing regulation, according to the needs of the community.
The authorities and house builders need to realize that some families have several children. They need to address people's needs, talk to people, ask what they want, what they need.
There are many ongoing challenges as banks and property developers hold a lot of power. But people continue to fight for decent homes in their city.
In Argentina, veterans and their families have paid homage to the soldiers who lost their lives in the 1982 Malvinas War. On the 36th anniversary of the start of the conflict, they gather at the monument to the fallen in the Malvinas in Buenos Aires. 649 Argentinians lost their lives during the two-month war between Argentina and Britain. The War Veterans Association asked the Argentinian government to fund ex-soldiers' pensions, as President Mauricio Macri had promised.
As a Malvinas War veteran, our position is that the islands are and always will be Argentine. And even if the English invader thinks that we were defeated in a battle, the warrior spirit of the Argentine soldier will never be defeated. We ask the authorities to grant us the historic reparation and early retirement that we so desire for the sake of our health and of all our mothers, wives and children. The reason is that the war has caused devastating psychological effects on our physical integrity and moral.
Pope Francis called on Sunday for peace in Gaza and Syria, reconciliation in Korea, and, quote, a just, peaceful and humane way to solve the political crisis in Venezuela. Pope Francis sent this message during his Easter speech from St. Peter's in the Vatican. The pontiff celebrated a mass together with tens of thousands of Catholics. Francis addressed the crowd calling for peace. In Venezuela, he also asked for international assistance to overcome political issues. Many Haitians in Port-au-Prince celebrated Easter with a traditional voodoo ceremony. Easter Sunday marks one of the holiest days of the voodoo calendar. Through sacrifices, music, and dance, believers show their devotion to the gods. Voodoo is a fusion of religious beliefs brought from Africa with Catholic elements from the colonial era. The Haitian government first recognized it in the 1960s.
There are many spirits here in Haiti. In these ceremonies, all the 101 spirits could appear. Each day, one of them could appear. There are many different types of spirits that can visit us. It's possible to have a ceremony for the Dambala god, and then Ogu, Hetsuli, Simbiandes, Grand Shaman, or Grand Bois gods could appear as well.
We'll take another short break, but join us after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Doctors at Gaza's Shifa hospital have said they don't have enough medical supplies to treat the growing number of injured Palestinians from the violent attack by the Israeli forces at the Gaza border. At least 16 Palestinians have been killed and hundreds more wounded by Israeli forces since Friday, when Palestinians started a 6-week demonstration called the March of Return. The Israeli forces used tank shells, live ammunition, and tear gas against the protesters. Tens of thousands of Palestinians continue to march near the Israeli border, and this is one of the biggest demonstrations against Israeli occupation in recent years.
Medical supplies are running out. Because of that, we are calling on all of the donors to supply the medical sector with medicine and other medical supplies for sensitive departments like the emergency, the operational rooms, and the intensive care rooms in order to be able to continue serving these injured people.
In a retaliatory move, China has announced it has slapped on tariffs on almost 130 U.S. imports. The tax hikes range from 15% to 25%. They mostly target U.S. foods like fruit, nuts, and wine. The highest additional tariffs of 25% will be tacked on U.S. scrap aluminum and frozen pork products. Overall, Chinese tariffs will affect $3 billion worth of U.S. goods. The new duties are in response to steel and aluminum tariffs announced by U.S. President Donald Trump in early March. There's still a 25% levy on $60 billion of Chinese imports he promised in late March. And that could spur an even tougher response from China.
We have made it clear that if we are forced into a trade war, China has the confidence and capabilities of safeguarding its own interests. We sincerely hope that U.S. policymakers would carefully hear the voices of domestic consumers and industries, carefully weigh what losses or gains to be brought to the United States if it adopts the measures that should not be adopted unilaterally.
Now I look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Ethiopia has sworn in Abiy Ahmed as its new prime minister. Just after taking office, Ahmed said he would like to resolve the border war with Eritrea that has lasted for 2 years and claimed over 70,000 lives. Ahmed is of Oromo descent, the country's largest ethnic group, and he has been a vocal opponent of the government. He will take the reins from Haile Mariam Desalegn, who resigned last month over the mass protests.
I wish to express our readiness to solve our differences, not only for the sake of mutual benefit, but also for the mutual benefit of the people of the two countries who are tied with blood. On this occasion, I would like to call up on the Eritrean government to show a similar stand.
The defunct Chinese space station Tiangong-1 has re-entered Earth somewhere over the South Pacific. That's all the details space officials have released for now. The space lab disintegrated under intense heat as it hurtled through Earth's atmosphere. The space station, which was 10 meters long and weighed over 8 tons, had been descending since 2016. It was launched in 2011, but the Chinese space scientists had lost contact with the spacecraft. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attended a South Korean concert for the first time on Sunday. Kim was filmed clapping after popular K-pop singers from the South performed at Grand Theatre in East Pyongyang. The artists are performing in North Korea for the first time in more than a decade, thanks to the thawing relations on the peninsula.
And with this, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English,